Afternoon, Gary. We're here to talk about the recent changes, very recent changes that have been announced in regard to plain English allergen labelling, or the acronym PEAL. First off, I've got a number of questions that I think will be coming to mind for our clients and our customers and our viewers watching this. What's the history or the reason behind this change?
Basically, a lot of people, mainly carers and parents, say that the allergen laws are not clear enough. So they're unsure as to whether something contains something or it doesn't. So for example, if the current requirement contains tree nuts, well, if you're only allergic to Brazil nuts, you can't eat anything that's got nuts in it.
And there wasn't a prescribed way in declaring the allergens. You had a number of choices, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Correct?
So for example, it's not really clear. If you say dairy, have you declared milk? If you declare butter, have you declared milk? But even more, if you declare, Havarti cheese, and just say Havarti, have you declared milk? Have you declared sodium caseinate? Have you declared milk? And we've had a death in a child who ate a muesli bar containing sodium caseinate, who his parents said don't have milk, and it was a debate as to whether that was legally declared properly or not.
So hence the name plain English, anyone can understand.
Yep.
The allergens will be identified in the product. So can you summarise plain English allergen labelling in a couple of sentences? And I should just say that this just applies to Australia at the moment. We're talking about Australian
Yes.
allergen laws.
And New Zealand.
And New Zealand.
And New Zealand. Same laws apply for New Zealand. Basically, what they've tried to do for most allergens is to use one word for them. So we have fish, we have egg, we have milk. So if we now have cream, we have to put cream, open bracket, milk, close bracket, for example, to make it really clear. Now, there are a couple of things where that's not quite the case.
And we'll get on to those, and I think you're talking about gluten.
And tree nuts, and the new category, mollusks.
Okay. So has the list of the Australian allergens that's in food actually changed?
Well, there's no new products that are allergenic, if that makes sense. So there's no food that's in the list that's different. What they've done is to make it clearer on some categories.
And prescribe the names.
Yeah, they've prescribed the names. So most of them, there's now one name. So milk is now milk, not dairy, and fish is now fish, not seafood, and we can't say shellfish anymore. So they've made one word for all of those categories.
So people would look down the list and see mollusk, and they're, that's new, but before that was covered in seafood.
Well, it was actually, that's what they weren't clear. Was
Yes.
mollusk in crustacea or was mollusk in fish? And if you put seafood, was that okay? So if you like mollusk, and for those who are unsure, mollusk is basically shellfish. Mollusk is octopus, calamari, squid, pipi, scallop, oyster, escargot, snails are mollusks. So that whole category is now separate. So we do have a new category. We've got crustacea, of which Balmain bugs, lobster, prawns, and we have fish. But now we have another category called mollusks, because there might be people who are only allergic to calamari.
So what I'm hearing is the terminology has really changed, whereas the allergic substances haven't. They've just been termed differently.
Yeah, there's nothing new in there that wasn't already there. So I suppose we do have one new category. We have mollusk, but really that was hidden in fish or crustacea. It's now a separate category.
Okay, so now there seems to be two components that you must have on how to declare an allergen, and that is the ingredient list and a separate allergen declaration.
Yeah,
Has this changed from before?
That's new. Previously, you didn't have to legally put an allergen statement. you must now have an allergen statement.
Right.
And the allergen statement, they say, must be near the ingredients list, or it must be clearly identified. And I think that's to cover people who might put gluten-free in big letters on the front, then don't have to say gluten-free. But for 99% of people, there'll be an ingredient list and an allergen statement. And the new law says also the allergen statement must be next to the ingredients.
Needs to be co-located.
Co-located, they say.
Yes.
And that's so you don't have the ingredient list on one side of the package and the allergen hidden down underneath. Because
Right.
if it's missing, people will think there are no allergens in it. Although the new laws cover that off as well.
Yes. So what about gluten? Because that's a very common allergen or a diet choice for people. How does gluten now get declared?
Well,
in plain English?
gluten's the reverse. So for most of them we only have one word. But there are some people who are only allergic to wheat or only allergic to barley or to rye. So what they've done now is split those out. And so previously we could just say cereals containing gluten. Now you must actually say
Name the cereal.
Name the cereal or cereals. And one of the, if you say triticale, which is a cross between rye and wheat, and we sometimes find in things like multigrain bread and, you know, those kibble trail mixes, you must declare both rye and wheat after that as well. So for the cereals containing gluten, every single one of them must be declared.
In the ingredient list, but does gluten need to get declared in the allergen statement?
In the allergen statement, you declare both. So you say wheat, gluten, rye, gluten, triticale, rye, wheat, gluten, oats, gluten. So you declare both.
So what else has changed? We've got mandatory terms for the ingredient list that you must use in the ingredient list. You must declare the allergen for each ingredient that you add.
Yes, previously you only, if you wrote milk powder, then you put butter, cream, you only had to declare it once because it was in milk. Now you've got to say milk powder, butter, milk, cream, milk, cheddar cheese, milk. Every single time an ingredient has milk in it, you need to declare
new.
milk.
That's new.
And those allergens all must now, the word milk must always be in bold.
Yes.
And that's also new. We sometimes...
So the legibility and the same font and the bold font has also been made mandatory. You must declare it in that way.
Yeah, the allergens must all be in bold, which means the allergen statement is going to all be in bold because it only has allergens. And also the size of the letters in the allergen statement must be equal to or bigger than the size of the letters in the ingredient list. So you can't have a big ingredient list and then a tiny little allergen statement underneath.
Interesting. What about the precautionary allergen labelling such as may contain? Has that changed?
That hasn't changed at all. That's just too hard at the moment. They want to get this bit right. So unfortunately, may contain. The thing that's changed, of course, may contain gluten has now changed because of the other law, so it's now may contain wheat, barley, oats. And the other one that's expanded out is tree nuts. You can't say tree nuts anymore.
May contain tree.
You must use every, so you know, walnut, almond, pistachio, pine nut, whatever it is, which means in an allergen statement, may contain tree nuts is also not allowed anymore. You must now say may contain and list all the nuts that it may contain.
What about food service, caterers, restaurants? How does this affect them?
Same laws apply to them. So previously I could walk up to a counter and say, does this contain nuts? And they would say yes, no. Now I can walk up and say, I'm allergic to Brazil nuts. Does this contain Brazil nuts?
So really, best practice for those businesses is to have an allergen matrix. They're going to have an expanded allergen matrix for mollusk, pine nuts, almonds, cashews.
Yeah, they're going to have to consider mollusks because that's new. Well, it's really not new, but it's been split out. They're going to have to look at all the cereals containing gluten and find out each one. And also the tree nuts. They're going to have to find out which of the actual tree nuts are in there.
And the same for product spec sheets that a supplier to food service would need to supply
Yes,
the
all
information.
the spec sheets are going to have to be updated, even for food service items.
Yes.
Remember that in food service it's on request, so unless you ask for the specification you won't get the information.
But it still needs to be updated.
They all still need to be updated.
Okay, what about alcohol?
Alcohol's in, so if you've got a beverage that has alcohol in it, like an Irish cream, you can't say, contains cream anymore. The ingredient list will now have to have the word milk in it.
Right. Small packages?
Small packages still have to declare allergens. So if you've got, individual lollies inside a pack, the allergens in each lolly has to be declared.
And inner packages of chips or snack foods?
The allergens have to be declared on those.
On each
each individual one. Muesli bars, small packets of chips, those sort of snack packs, multi-pack snack packs, all of those have to declare the allergens on each one.
So really what we're talking about is quite a considerable overhaul, some very deliberate direction on this is how you will declare your allergens in this manner, using the same terms, using the same format, having that bold format.
The same font, the same layout, the same design, the same position on the label.
They've really been quite directive.
Yeah, they really want this to be simpler so that, particularly parents can easily tell their kids what to look for and kids can easily read them.
So the big question is, when does this come in?
Well, it's already started, so it's happened. We've got 3 years to get everything right. So 3 years to update the labels, 3 years to update the specifications, the menu boards, and then we've got 2 years stock in trade. So for food service, that's not really an issue. So for 3 years, food service has got to have it right. For retailers, you've got the stock there.
Products and retorted products, yeah.
You've really got 3 years to run out your old labels, change over to the new labels, and then stock's allowed to sit on the shelves for another 2 years. So there could be some things with very, very long shelf life, like alcohol and canned food, that might actually have to be pulled off shelves 5 years from now because the labelling's not correct.
So what about developing new products now? If you were going to market with a new product, you should really be working off these.
Well, these are new laws.
These are
new laws.
In standard, where can people find it?
1.2.4. So the allergen laws are in the Food Standards Code. This is the current law.
Under mandatory declarations. Yes.
The way it's talking about is you have 3 years to change products. So existing products. So if you're getting new products, your new products should
comply.
Should already meet the new laws when they're launched.
Right. So what else do people have to do? This is obviously going to take some time to work through the chain. If you were an importer, what would you need to be doing now?
You need to be telling your suppliers overseas that the laws are changed, because we have now some of the hardest laws. In fact, on some of this, we've now got the hardest laws in the world. So if you're supplying a brand all around the world, you may have to update your world label for Australia and New Zealand.
Okay. What about people who are manufacturing here and actually produce a PIF?
The PIF, the product information form, is basically another form of a specification. That will have to be updated. I would imagine the people who create the PIF, the Food and Grocery Council, are going to release a new PIF.
And that's the same with people that operate the software like FoodWorks and things like that.
FoodWorks, that will have to be updated. There is some allergen software up there that dietitians use. Things like...
So the changes are going to be slow and take a while to percolate through the system.
Yeah.
Because if you look up a product information sheet now, you're going to have to go back to the supplier and say, do you have almonds? Do you have cashews rather than tree nuts? But they may not know that at the moment.
Correct. Even if you're in food service and you use a dietetic database like Seaboard or Delegate, that software will have to be updated to meet the new laws.
So quite.
Substantial changes.
The other thing that if people do have a labelling checklist and they do their own internal review, they're going to have to update that and be up to date with these changes.
Yes.
So update your templates for your label checks, update your hazard manual or your food safety program to reflect these changes so that your labelling procedure refers to the right allergens rather than the old laws. So changes to your food safety programs, changes to your software that you use, changes to the product information, whether it be on a PIF, whether it be on a swing tag, whether it be on a label.
Whether it be on your website.
Whether it be on your website, yes. Yes, okay. So it is a substantial change. It is quite directive. People need to be aware and go and look. We've obviously put information up on our website.
Yep.
Correct Food Systems, under labelling, under plain English allergen labels, all the information, a summary of the information is there, and the link to the Food Standards Code and the relevant schedules are there. But we can also advise, we can do label reviews, we can provide consultancy advice on what you need to do to update your system. But firstly, people need to actually read about the system and be awareness. And this interview is part of that awareness strategy.
This is the biggest change in allergen labelling law since they were introduced almost 20 years ago, and significant change. We're going to see most of the products in supermarkets and petrol stations change their labels in the next couple of years to meet these new laws.
Yeah, so don't go printing a large volume of labels at the moment.
Now's the time not to be printing a huge amount of labels, because
Yes.
you're probably going to have to change them all.
Yes, so with that we will leave you with the awareness that plain English allergen labelling has landed in Australia. If you're supplying products into Australia or you're manufacturing or making, even serving food in Australia, you need to be aware of these changes, that it is mandatory, that it's quite directive, and read our website or contact us for further information.
And for those wondering, when does it apply? It's already, the regulation, it already applies. You've got 3 years to get it all done.
So, yes, welcome to PEAL,
Yes.
Plain English Allergen Labelling. Thank you.